DRC, a nation of continental proportions. The DRC's central location in Africa positions it as a strategic trade hub, supported by its membership in ECCAS, EAC, and COMESA, fostering regional economic cooperation. Booming economy and strong human capital. Booming economy in 2023 saw real GDP growth of 8.4%, driven by key critical minerals such as copper, cobalt, lithium, and germanium, the future of which is further supported by strong human capital, of which 45% is under the age of 18. A growing market and rich in mineral resources. With over 80 million people and a growing market in its main economic and population hubs, the DRC is one of the world's richest countries in resources, home to major deposits of copper, cobalt, diamonds, gold, and other strategic minerals that are globally renowned. Congo Basin, 1.5 million square kilometers tropical forest. The Congo Basin is one of the largest carbon sinks, harboring the world's second largest tropical forest, spanning 1.5 million squared kilometers. Estimated to absorb 1.2 billion tons of carbon dioxide annually, protecting the Congo Basin from deforestation is vital for helping regulate the Earth's climate and combating global warming. Agriculture. The DRC is the world's third largest cassava producer and the largest plantain producer. Environmental initiatives aim to conserve 30% of territory by 2030, addressing ecological challenges. The Democratic Republic of Congo is on the path to renewal. Recent reforms to improve governance and the business climate are boosting investor confidence for a prosperous future. A resource-rich mining sector. The DRC has between 60% and 80% of the world's coltan reserves, 70% of the world's cobalt reserves, large reserves of copper, third larger producer in the world, diamonds, gold, and other precious minerals. Germanium, the STL plant, owned by DRC's Gécamines and partly financed by the largest commercial bank in the DRC, produces 30 tons of germanium per year. The USA needs 30 tons annually, but only produces 2.5. Lithium, home to one of the world's largest hard rock lithium deposits. Agricultural potential still largely untapped. The country has 80 million hectares of arable land, of which only 10% is currently cultivated. This offers enormous opportunities for the development of agribusiness. Infrastructure as a key strategic investment, particularly in energy and roads. The Inga dams, located around 220 kilometers from Kinshasa, have the potential capacity to generate approximately 45 gigawatts of power, enough to eventually supply a third of Africa. Additionally, developing road infrastructure to link economic hubs and export gateways is vital for current mining exports and future agricultural exports. Financing tomorrow's DRC with today's resources. Revised agreements between private companies and public institutions will finance future projects through increased royalties. Financing tomorrow's Democratic Republic of Congo for the Congolese people. DRC, time for choice.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are getting started here, so if you please take your seats. It's fantastic to see such a robust turnout for this important topic today. My name is Aubrey Ruby, and I am a senior fellow at the Africa Center at the Atlantic Council, and it's my pleasure and honor to be your MC today for this important program. And we are here to talk about a country of critical import. As you have seen in this video, and we'll play it again at the end for those who might have missed it, the DRC is absolutely huge. It is as large as Western Europe. The Congo River is twice as long as the Mississippi. The Congo Basin as a rainforest is only second in size to the Amazon, and none of us would have these without the DRC, as it is home to 70% of the world's coltan and vast reserves of cobalt and other critical minerals. And for too long, we felt at the Africa Center that the DRC has not gotten the investment attention it deserves, the diplomatic attention it deserves. And so we've been working on a program with the wonderful support from one of our partners, Rawbank, to really build out increased research and thought leadership on the Democratic Republic of Congo. So it's my pleasure now to introduce our keynote speaker. She is an absolute champion for deepening U.S.-African ties. She's visited the continent at least 8 times since she took her office. And I think I've seen her on at least 4 or 5 of those trips, everywhere from Abidjan to Cape Town. And Rita Jo Lewis, she's brought a new energy to EXIM Bank. As many of you may have known, US EXIM Bank had a quiet period where it wasn't able to be a most dynamic part of the architecture of US commercial policy. But under Rita Jo Lewis's leadership, it has become a real force. And so join me in welcoming Rita Jo Lewis to stage, the president and chair of the board of directors of the US EXIM Bank.
Thank you so much, Aubrey. It is always a pleasure when you get that phone call from Fred, which I know many of you received in this room. But it's also such a pleasure to know that I am standing here before all of you because of the work at US EXIM that we take exceptionally serious, working with all of our countries, working with all of our exporters. And as I said to the founding chair of Atlantic Council, General Jones, you know, we enjoy tremendously working with third-party validators like the Atlantic Council. But more importantly, there are so many people in this room that we have worked with over the years, and we want to continue to work. So thank you, Audrey, and thank you, Fred, for just giving me a few minutes to talk about EXIM. Yes, we are truly honored to be here to celebrate the work that we're doing in the Congo. We do not need to just have the continued conversation about the challenges. We need to be talking about the opportunities. And the opportunities are many. So when I sit and I see my friend from the AFC, Mr. Chairman, we really appreciate, Smaila, the work that we have also been doing with him across the continent. Now, let's talk about EXIM Bank for just a few minutes and how I think we are working with all of our government agencies, especially our Department of State, now White House, National Security and Economic Team, and all of the other agencies, so that we can work as a, what we call in the Biden-Harris administration, a whole of government approach in order to tackle not just challenges, but to tackle the opportunities that we see that comes before each and every one of you every day, especially when you're talking about DRC Day, for the road to investment, peace, and security in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Now, as many of you know, EXIM Bank is America's only official export credit agency in the US government. Now, our mission is simple: to support American jobs by facilitating the exports of US goods and services. Now, I always like to say, when we talk about jobs, we can't just talk about what's happening in America. We also have to talk about what's happening in the host country of which we're dealing with, because at the end of the day, it is about how we are making sure not only that our companies are competitive, but we want to make sure the workers, that the individual citizens have the opportunity for jobs, the jobs opportunity in the so many fields that I know that's being discussed here over these next several hours. You know, for 90 years, EXIM has been a steadfast partner to US companies and to foreign buyers who purchase goods, and I always have to say, and services, who want to export them abroad. We have been that partner, providing the financing tools needed to succeed in the competitive global market, particularly when private sector lenders are unable to step in. Now, one of the things that when we were reauthorized in 2019, Congress asked us to have some additional mandates that they wanted to see us fulfill. With an agency that has a lending cap of $135 billion, we've spent about $35 billion since 2020 and still counting. So, we need to be in rooms like this because we're always looking for business, and we're looking for those bankable projects that we can do and use the financing tools that we have to provide financing solutions for U.S. exporters to be able to benefit them, who we want to make sure that they can get and obtain the access to financing that is going to allow our exporters to make purchase decisions based on the quality of the goods and the service. So here at XM, one of our number one mandates is that we have to have, that Congress has asked us, is we always got to be leveling the playing field. That is our watchword, leveling the playing field. And how do we do that? Today, I want to also highlight the remarkable work that XM is doing to support the critical areas like the MSP. I'm sure you all have already heard about the Mineral Security Partnership. You're going to hear even more about that, the Libido Corridor, and the Biden-Harris administration's signature initiative, PGI, the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment. These are initiatives coupled with our China and Transformational Export Program underscores how XM is positioning the United States to lead in shaping the future of global energy, technology, and trade. For those of you who do not know, I always like to say, I never like to send people to websites, but I always say you got to go to the xm.gov website because it tells you right then and there how, one, from a country limitation schedule, where we are open and closed throughout the continent. It also tells you, I always say you got to read the notes because it tells you right there in the notes that if we may be closed, but if we are, how we can externalize the risk to make sure that we're in the market. And that is the goal, to be in the market. Not only to be in the market, when Congress gave us that 2019 reauthorization approval, they asked us to make more of that lending cap available in transformational export areas. That's everything from the AIs, the semiconductors, the fintechs, the biomed, the biotech, and then of course in semiconductors, renewables, wastewater, transit, and we tucked critical minerals right under those transformational exports because of all those sectors that I just named, none of them can operate without those critical minerals. They also asked us to do more business, make more financing available in the small business arena, and also in the renewable energy efficiency, energy storage. But one of the things that I think continues to bring me back before audiences like this, it also asked us to make more financing available in sub-Saharan Africa. And so in June of 22, the United States, as you know, along with partners from around the globe, launched the MSP. And this initiative has brought together so many friends and allies with the purpose of addressing the most critical challenge of our time, ensuring secure, diverse, and sustainable supply chains for critical energy minerals. And so one of the things that we are excited at XM is that we have been a partner with Secretary Blinken and Undersecretary Fernandez from the start of this initiative. And we believe that it represents an important alignment with the goals that we all have, recognizing that by investing in the mining, processing, and refining of critical minerals, we do not only support American businesses, but also contribute to a more secure and resilient global economy. You're going to hear my colleagues in the government also talk about the Libido Corridor and the regional connectivity. So in Africa, the thing about the Libido Corridor that you're going to hear today, and you probably have already been working, many of you have been working on, stretching from Zambia, Copper Belt to the Atlantic port in Angola, and is going to transform regional trade across Angola, the DRC, and Zambia. And so we are very excited to be able to do our part in the Libido Corridor, and very excited about the work that we've been doing in Angola. And for those of you who understand that the work that we have been doing in Angola has really been in those transformational exports, and we have been working very diligently announcing last year one of the largest renewable projects ever in the history of XM, about $907 million. And then we came right back around and with President Lorenzo and his team and some work that they had also presented and did another $1.6 billion around mini grids and rural electrification. We think all of that work is also going to be tying into the Libido Corridor and the work that we all have to do to continue to be supportive at this time in sub-Saharan Africa. You know, another critical milestone that we have also seen is the work, and we've been very excited to see the Memorandum of Understanding on EV supply chain, and it has been one that I know my colleagues at State who are going to also speak to, have been excited to see that the Vice Prime Minister of the Congo and the DRC Secretary of State, along with our Secretary and the ministers in a number of other African leaders at the summit, was able to sign to be able to continue to say that all of us, it's going to take all of us to play a serious role in facilitating the EV supply chain. So the thing that is exciting for us at XM is that in the critical mineral space, we have been working with partners all over the world because it's going to, we like to say, it's going to take more than one government agency. It's going to take more than one government. It's going to take more than one private sector company, more than one nonprofit entity that is putting a spotlight on the issues that we are all faced with. It is really going to have to take the combination of collaborations and partnerships that is in order for us to be able to move forward. And it is through that partnership, when I say it cannot only be one country, being able to support the work that President Biden and Vice President Harris have done around PGI, the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment, with Vice President Biden's G7 colleagues, is very exciting for us. And so we're really glad of the bold vision that many of you are working on here today. We know that the commitment that we have made at XM for the continent, the commitment that we have made in meeting with leaders from the continent, meeting with those who are the leaders, especially in the critical mineral space, just says that we pray and hope, and the work that we can all do together is going to continue to lead to be allowing all of us to lean forward in the work that we have to do and the work that we have to do together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair Lewis. Thank you so much for your passion and energy, in particular when it comes to deepening U.S. commercial ties. And now we're going to have a conversation. I mean, as you said, in order for XM Bank to do more, we need bankable projects. And so we have two leaders coming to stage who are working exactly on building bankable projects. And we're going to have a conversation led by the President and CEO of the Atlantic Council, Fred Kemp, in which he speaks to Samaila Zaibaru, who is the President and CEO of Africa Finance Corporation, and Mustafa Raji, who leads Rawbank. Please come to stage.
Gentlemen, I think you see by the size of this audience what interest there is in this conversation. This is an unusual conversation for IMF World Bank Week in Washington. You've already been introduced by Aubrey. Aubrey, thank you so much for your opening words, but also thank you for your work for the Atlantic Council. It's always such a pleasure to see the chairman and president of XM Bank here. We work with her all over the world at the Atlantic Council, and I was most recently with her in Istanbul just a couple of weeks ago, so it's great to have her lead us off. Let's start with, I think people know maybe the AFC better than they know Rawbank, but I'm going to let both of you kind of introduce yourselves and your institutions. I will only add before you go first, President Zubairu, that you probably won't brag enough about yourself, so I'll brag about you a little bit. So you've, in 6 years you've been in charge, you've tripled the investments to 13.2 billion. Total assets have grown from 4.1 to 12.3 billion. You've been named CEO of the year. You also have some interesting background from Dangote Cement Company, so you know the private sector as well. But I think it'd be interesting for this group to hear how you operate, what you set as your priorities, and then as you're looking at the DRC, how you judge that in your portfolio of opportunities.
Thank you very much for that. Thanks to all of you for being here today. I know that you're all busy, and we're glad you're able to spend this time with us. And I'd like to just stand on existing protocol, but I must call out my friend Chair Louis for her active energy on the continent and all that she does to make sure that Africa is on the map and that we're able to finally connect the investment flows into Africa. Thanks, Fred, for those very kind words. We don't talk much about what we do, that's true, and it's because there's just so much to do, and we want to focus on getting it done. So I tell my team that there are several reasons why things don't work, but we have this rare opportunity, being here today and now, to find the reasons to make them work. And there are several people that depend on our execution, outcome-based mindset to deliver for Africa. So we're focused on ensuring that this African potential that we've heard about since we're children, that in our time we do something to demonstrate that it is possible. So when we look at a country like DRC, which is really one of the richest countries on earth, but also one of the most challenged places to do business with, we try to focus on how can we manage the risks to assure the returns. How can we build examples of what is possible and that be, I would say, the momentum for other things to come in place. We have to look at the opportunities on a case-by-case basis because you can't solve for the whole. We look at the fact that a country like DRC has minerals and metals valued at something like $24 trillion. And for you to understand what that means, the GDP of the US is $27 trillion. The GDP of Europe is about $18 trillion. The GDP of China is about $17 trillion. But the GDP of DRC is just $67 billion, if I'm right. So what that tells you is that there's such a big gap from where they are today to what they could be. What's also important about DRC is that it has one of the largest forest covers, as mentioned by Aubrey earlier on today. And what people don't know is that it stores 85 billion tons of carbon dioxide. And it has the capacity to sequester 600 million tons of carbon dioxide annually. What does that mean? That means DRC is critical for the energy transition. It has the minerals and metals required for the energy transition, and it also has the forest cover to absorb the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And it's important that we find ways to work together to demonstrate what is possible and see how we can build on that going forward. I'm very proud of the work we're doing with Rawbank. We have collaborated together to finance the Kakula mine. That is a mine that we've increased production from 450,000 tons to something to like 600,000 tons. What's also interesting is that they are using renewable energy from hydro dams in DRC, that is clean energy, to process copper ores to copper concentrates. And there's a plan to build one of the largest copper smelters in the world in the DRC, again, using hydro energy. What does that mean? That means we're seeing industrial decarbonization at scale already happening in Africa. And it's important to know that we can't aspire for net zero, or we can't aspire to the electric future that we want, and we're processing minerals and metals with carbon-intensive energy. So Africa, DRC in particular, like most of Africa, offers the least carbon-intensive part to net zero. Why? Because we can have green copper produced from the DRC. With the smelter in place, DRC will have one of the lowest carbon footprint of copper produced globally. Now, it's also important to know the advantage that DRC and most of Africa has. So most copper in the world is about 0.6% concentrate. That's the percentage. In DRC, in this mine in particular, is 5%. Most of DRC is over 3%. So most resources that exist in the world, Africa has them in abundance and at a higher grade. The high grade in Africa means you need less energy to process them, which is why it doesn't make any sense to continue to use the existing supply chain architecture of exporting raw materials from Africa to China and the other parts of the world. It makes sense to process those minerals and metals in Africa. And that's why we're demonstrating with the Kamakakula copper mine that it is possible, and we think this can be done at scale. To your other question about how I to your other question.
I'm sorry, we don't have any fine crystal for you to drink.
No, that's fine. To the other question about how I inspired the team, I will just use an example. When the US government announced their plans to have a new Africa policy, we approached, I talked to my team, and I said to my team that, look, this is an important opportunity for Africa. It's important that we reach out to the government and offer ourselves as partners to help them execute on their policy. So we approached PGII, that's the Program for Global Infrastructure Investments, and said to them that we are the Africa Finance Corporation. We were established to build the infrastructure that will enable industrialization take place in Africa. We are focused on energy, transport and logistics, heavy industries, telecoms and technology, as well as natural resources. Our focus is on developing to de-risk projects, diversifying the risk of these projects, and distributing them to partners. And we have several track records of how we've done that. We are focused on ensuring that there is a pipeline of bankable projects out of Africa, and we do that by doing the heavy lifting to make the investments to de-risk those opportunities. And they said, okay, fine, sounds interesting. What can we do together? We said, Africa requires infrastructure. And they said, okay, they have a couple of ideas in mind, and we would see what is possible. And that conversation continued. And we got to a point where we started talking about the Lobito Corridor. So the Lobito Corridor is in two parts. At the time we were talking to them, we were already acting as financial advisors on the Lobito Atlantic Grade Corridor, which is from DRC into Angola. And the conversation that they had with us was on the corridor from northwest Zambia in Chingola to Luakano in Angola. That's an 800-kilometer rail line. And we engaged with them, we made a lot of progress, and they appointed us as the lead developers for that project. What that meant was that we would deploy our own capital to de-risk the opportunity and, of course, distribute to partners. So we signed an agreement last year at the EU Gateway Conference. It was a 7-party agreement, USPGII, the European Commission, the governments of DRC, Angola, and Zambia, the African Development Bank, and ourselves. And of course, we got to work immediately, and the team, incredible team, commissioned a feasibility study. The feasibility study is out. We have, I would say, second version of the feasibility study. More importantly, we signed a concession agreement last month. That is unprecedented. To move from MOU to concession agreement in less than 1 year is unprecedented. Why? Because of our approach. Our approach is that, okay, look, We can't solve for the whole now. We know what we must have, and we know it will take 2-3 years to have it all. But we can agree a framework of what is possible. And within that framework, we have, I would say, a minimum criteria of what is acceptable. And once that is achieved, that will be an annex to the concession agreement. That will be condition for bankability. So we created several, I would say, gaps that allowed us to agree a framework that we could execute, and that has delivered a bankable project for us. That was possible by the open collaboration, open-minded collaboration of the teams at PGII, the teams at the DRC, the teams in Angola, teams in Zambia, and all of the government agencies that we've had to work with. The teams in the EU, the teams at US TDA, everybody working together and make sure it's possible. So our approach really is one of collaboration. We think that once we have an open-minded approach, once we are focused on outcomes, once we are focused on execution, we would achieve what we want. And it's the same way I think that we need to look at DRC. We need to look at DRC as a country where there are lots of opportunities, like I mentioned, and there's a lot of risk as well. So we should be managing those risks on a sequential basis. We should find parcels of what can work, make them work, and see how we can build on that to replicate more success.
That's just a terrific opening, and I'm going to come back to that project because it's wonderful that you've pulled it off, but the trick is now how does one replicate it. But let me start with first with Mustafa Raji, and I'm really delighted that he's a relatively new member of the Atlantic Council's International Advisory Board, graduate in Master of Finance at Babson College in Boston. Worked at HSBC, worked elsewhere before that. Mustafa, I'd love it if you would open telling a little bit the history of the bank. And obviously, if I don't have this wrong, your family is fourth generation in DRC. And as you open up with your opening comment, the DRC is often talked about as a sleeping giant. And I think the AFC president was also talking about how it really isn't hitting at its weight yet, its potential. And it's got vast resources, also significant challenges. Tell us a little bit about your bank and how you're looking at the opportunities and challenges.
So a little bit of our story, and for many of you who've been following the DRC, we hear the sleeping giant story, we hear the $24 trillion of minerals underground, and like you, I've grown up in Kinshasa. Well, I've grown up in Kinshasa, probably not like you, but I've been hearing this most of my life. What I think I've set out to do with my life's work is we need to convert what we know is underground into real dollars and cents. We need to ensure that the conditions that the DRC has been endowed with and the mineral resources actually translate into prosperity for the Congolese people. We are today, in 2024, and I find that at this stage in time, there's a call to action that's required. And our bank, Fred, is merely a platform. It's a perfect platform for me to exercise what my dream is. And my dream is for the DRC to be a significant player on the world stage and alleviate the poverty conditions that exist. So it ties in at a perfect moment. Today, global trends for critical minerals are an absolute topic. And the world sees this as a zero-sum game between the Eastern powers and the Western powers, and everyone's sort of leveraging off their future projections of technology, of climate change, and a lot of it rests on what's available as critical minerals within the continent and DRC more in particular. And as I work daily in the DRC and I sort of sense the zero-sum situation between China and the US, it's deeply disturbing because I think we need to look at this problem differently. How do we grow our production exponentially so that we can cater to the requirements of a global requirements? We need to move out of the zero-sum situation and say, all right, what are the conditions that need to be created in the DRC so that we can satisfy the requirements of the US, of Europe, of China? Because at the end of the day, we are living in a global village. And at some point, we need to take that sort of higher view. It was the view of the US, and that is really the US leadership that we're calling for here, in order to sort of say that, all right, for the DRC to grow its production exponentially, what does the DRC need? What we need is bankable infrastructure projects, as the AFC is so specialized in financing and putting together. And we need to de-risk these projects. And the best way to de-risk these projects is to use the tools that the US government has in its possession, such as the DFC or US Exim Bank, to allow this country to access the pools of capital that are available globally. You know, if tomorrow the DRC needs to raise $10 billion, it's really not a great sum of money. Should the DFC be able to provide a credit guarantee program for the country under certain conditions that sort of meet the frameworks that the DFC or US Exim Bank operates under, we could mobilize this capital to have real results. Once you have energy and roads, there's no limit to the amount of production that can be created, right? That infrastructure that gets laid into the DRC then promotes private sector investment, like the Ivanhoe mines, like Glencore's projects, to continue to expand capacity, because there's an economic incentive to grow the production of copper, to grow the production of cobalt, tungsten, tantalum. And that's an accelerator that creates wealth within a country. And so this is really sort of my vocation. Rawbank is the largest bank in the DRC, and I use this as a platform to sort of exercise the vision that I feel that the people of the DRC deserve.
So, critical minerals, and just one follow-up for you. Critical minerals, you talk about cobalt. What sectors do you see as offering the greatest potential for investments and collaboration?
I think so. If you look at the mineral space, it's copper, cobalt.
Yep.
As Samaila President Zubairu just mentioned earlier, the ore grades in the DRC are second to none. So Chile, which is the largest producer of copper, produces 5 million tons, but the average ore grade that enters the processing plants is sub 1%. And as Mr. Zubairu mentioned, the average ore grades in the DRC range from anywhere to 3 to 5%, and in certain areas can go north of 10%. So it's just too rich of a deposit not to be sort of tapped into. And I think that you have to look at the DRC as being the Saudi Arabia of oil, of tomorrow's oil. And so we need to create all of the conditions around the DRC to accelerate that development and make the most of it for the people.
Very, very exciting. So,
Yeah.
President Jibaro, I want to come back to you. We only really have 6 or 7 minutes left. These are designed as relatively short, but intense and very substantive panels. In case everyone hasn't noticed, we're a couple of blocks away from the White House. We're a couple of blocks away from Treasury. You've played this catalyzing role that you talked about in the development of the Libido Corridor. Let me get to that question. With U.S. elections just a few days away, where do you think the next U.S. administration should look to replicate this kind of success in the DRC or beyond? What more can U.S. or Western private sector banks, pension funds, companies, what more can they do to support these efforts?
Very good question. I think the way I would like to answer that question is to build on what Mustafa just said. I think the way to look at Africa is crucial as a growth opportunity for the world. Africa can serve itself and serve the needs of the globe. What is important is how can we enable Africa deliver on its promise? What Africa needs is capital and expertise. Expertise through partnerships, capital through collaboration with existing financial institutions on the continent, not new financial institutions. So we have a good relationship with USDFC. We have a line from them of $250 million. They're increasing it to $500 million. So it's to make it 5 billion, not 500 million. We have an MOU with US Exim, to do 500 million. It's to do more of that, and to get to a point whereby we can execute. So the real issue is how can we work with existing institutions that are demonstrating or have demonstrated they have capacity to get things done, in partnership with US government and US agencies to do more. In fact, in partnership with the rest of the world to do more. So as we think about executing on the Libido Corridor, our main goal is not just to invest our balance sheet, but to use our balance sheet to mobilize for investments to come through. So we're going to put in place a guarantee line that allows us to provide access to pension funds in Africa and globally, to come and invest in the project. We are investment grade. We will stand behind the project, and we will stand in front of the investors. So we can provide them the risk mitigation that they need to make the investment. So it is really, how can we grow our capacity for risk mitigation, our capacity to mobilize investment flows, together with partners like Rawbank that are on the ground, because you need a bank on the ground to collect the revenues, from the operations. So we always have this architecture of working with banks on the ground, ourselves and international banks, to get things done. So it's really how we can scale our capacity to mobilize capital that is required, how we can make it attractive for partners, American firms, to come and set up business in Africa, how we can have real businesses that would employ locals. Locals will acquire the skills, and then they themselves to set up the business in future. I always give the example of banking and oil in Nigeria. I remember Citibank was in Nigeria at some point. It was one of the largest banks, but now it's like maybe number 11 or number 13. And the first 5 are all Nigerian banks. It's still there, it's still operating, but the Nigerian banks have grown bigger. Why? Because they can take more risk. And they have the capacity, they've learned the skills, and they are deploying it. Same with the oil and gas industry. They've worked in Shell, Exxon, Mobil, Chevron. Now they can go and bid for fields themselves, and they are running the show. So it's the same way we need to get Americans, Europeans, Chinese, whoever wants to do business in Africa, come down, set up business there, but set it up in an equitable way, set it up in a way that it's a partnership, set it up in a way that there will be value added, there will be skills that will be acquired by Africans, and they can replicate it. Also have a partnership with the schools, the universities, the technical schools that will provide the expertise and I would say skills to operate the various aspects of the operations.
That's compelling. Let me turn to Mustafa for the final question. Along the same lines, and Mr. President, in full disclosure, I wear my main hat as CEO of the and President of the Atlantic Council, but I'm also on an advisory council for the DFC as well. And I know Scott Nathan is very excited about the opportunities in the region, and I'll carry your message back to him as well. Mustafa, in your view, what else can the U.S. do to encourage and build upon the successes we've talked about, like the Libido Corridor? Is there specific legislation, executive branch action should be taken, improved upon, better coordinated? What would be your recommendations?
I think on the whole, the question really comes back to what Mr. Zubair said. It's talking about mobilizing capital and mobilizing expertise. And us in the world of finance, we know what we need to mobilize capital. So we've been working on the continent 2 decades now for our bank. AFC probably has a much longer history. And it's not that we are, I think what we would like the US government to say, we're not experimenting anymore. We have 2 decades of expertise behind us, and we're not just standing, but our organizations, relative organizations, are prospering. So I think the world needs to understand that we are able to do things right, and leverage off our 2 decades, at least our 2 decades of knowledge, of expertise, just to scale it up. To scale it up and look at it with more confidence, rather than with the skepticism that's currently, I think, casted around the views of Central Africa. Another thing that I think I'd call out for the US government is to help us find a security solution for the Eastern Congo. There's been civil strife there, and a disproportionate amount of government budgets, and the Minister of Finance has joined us from the DRC. The public treasuries had to suffer tremendously to sort of defend its borders in Eastern Congo. So in order to have the mobilization of capital, you need to have peace and security. We really look towards the US leadership to helping us find that solution, so that we can now, us private sector players, DFIs, all of the development banks that participate in the DRC space, and there's DBSA, we have commercial banks that are active in the DRC, such as Citibank, and Peter Sullivan's here, who's head of Public Sector Africa. So everybody's interested, but let's create those conditions, and one of them is peace. just find it so hard to believe that it's so hard to find a solution to this problem, because we've been at it for 2 years now. And if we can finally nail it down, nothing like it.
Terrific. So we could go on. Everybody would like us to go on for another hour, but we're not going to, and we can't. So we're wrapping up here. In closing, I just want to greet you all also on behalf of the Senior Director of our Africa Center, Ambassador Ramayad, who's on assignment in France right now, where many of you know before she joined us in a previous incarnation, she was in the cabinet of President Sarkozy of France. So she greets you all as well, and the two of you as well. And thank you for your time, and thank you for this rich discussion. And I'm passing now back to Aubrey.
Thank you, Fred. And thank you for that robust discussion about the prerequisites for mobilization of capital at scale. And now we'd like to hear directly from the government of DRC on those efforts. We're graced by the presence of His Excellency, the Minister of Finance, Dudu Fwemba-Lekende, and he will share some of his views and the vision for economic growth in the DRC. Welcome, Minister, to the stage.
For giving me this share. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity. We thank the Atlantic Council, and we do thank our friend.
You can hold it if you want.
Oh, no, come on. My friend Mustafa. This was the greatest speech that I've heard from this morning, because he was talking about advocating about the peace. There is nothing that we can achieve without the peace. And in that region, people were living decades on decades together. Rwandese, Congolese people were living there. But from 1984, all of these things that we have seen have been happening. And now this is the time to end the war on that part of the world. And we do believe that if we got peace in the Central Africa, in Grand Lac, part of the Africa, there will be peace everywhere and prosperity. There is one solution. People must live together, and we want that American leadership can come on that problem, so we can sort out the case and bring peace and prosperity for the people. We do believe that our country got the opportunity, and we do have potential to bring economy grow. And we've seen from 2021 and 2022, a GDP growth, we went from a GDP growth of 8.8 on 2021, 8.4 on 2022. Last year, we've been around 8.4 once again, and this year, with IMF, we are projecting a GDP growth of more than 5.4. This is showing that our economy is keeping going strong, and the macroeconomic framework underground is doing well, and we've seen the deceleration of inflation from the June month, according to the good coordination of monetary policy and budgetary policies set together with between the government and the central bank. And we do believe that this is the opportunity to bring people inside. We know that we're coming from too far. We know war, we know instability, but now the DRC is moving forward. There is no way that the country gets back once again. We're gonna move forward, and we do believe that we've got our place to play, and we call upon people to come and play the game. Now, what are we doing in the country actually? We are transforming the country after succeeding a 3-year program with the IMF for the first time of our history. Now we are dealing with the negotiation for the second one. And we do believe that we're going to achieve the negotiation, and we're going to go under that new program with more opportunity for the people. And we do believe that we're going to invest. What we need in our country, because the country is so huge, we want roads, we want energy. we want agriculture, we want people to come and invest. We are fighting with corruption because we know that there is a story of corruption in the country. And since 2019, the head of the state have made all things to make sure that we're fighting corruption, we're fighting money laundering, and we don't have words, we got policies. And we are working with our partners from multilateral to bilateral. Everything is going smoothly and we're moving fast as possible. And we do believe that the country is going to play a good way on the future of the global. And actually, as you know, the country has a huge potential on the challenge of the climate change. And this is another issue that we do believe that we can come and invest in the country. And we do believe that women are the most affected on that issue of climate change. So we need policies that can bring people together, that can empower the women, so we make change in the life of people. Now, what is the next step? The next step is to make sure that we set up policy that can welcome people, can bring direct investors to come and invest in the country, because the climate change is on the task, but the business environment we've achieved more success on many reform on that field, because actually you can come in DRC and we've been secured, and we're doing everything to make sure that everybody must come to our country and be free to do business. This is the point, the overview of the government, and we do believe that together we can achieve it with our multilateral partners, bilateral partners. Everybody can come, because DRC is the place to be for the next 20 years to come and do business. This is what I can say, and I will end this opening speech by telling all of people around the world that what we need in our country is peace. We want peace with our neighbors. We want peace with everybody, because we've got the potential to bring everybody on the table and to deal with the poverty, to bring people out of the poverty. And we do believe that the policy that has been set up and the partnership that we're having with the World Bank, with all of these partners, IMF, those partnerships are going to help us to move forward as fast. And as you see, we've got the B-mine sovereign rating with the SAP, and we've got the B3 with the Standard & Poor's and the Moody's. So it shows that the country is moving forward with a stable outlook. It shows that the country is going to move forward, and we need to keep the momentum to go fast as possible and to bring people to come and do business in the country. All of these things of risk and this and that, you can find risk everywhere in the world. But what is more important is the commitment of the government. And actually, we've got a commitment that is showing that the government is deciding to move forward and to scare people to do business in the country. This is what I can say on this opening remarks, and I thank you for everything, for this opportunity, because on this time, I could not believe that I could find a lot of people, a bunch of good people around this table, because we are talking about DRC. When people are talking about DRC, people are thinking about wars. They're thinking about crisis on the eastern part of the country. But thank you for your comings. Thank you for everything. And we do believe that with this support, you are giving us force and energy to move forward, because today is better, but best is still yet to come. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Please. Thank you, Honorable Minister. For those of us who live and work in Washington, it's rare to see a minister speak without notes, without talking points, and it is incredibly refreshing to hear that kind of direct talk about the challenges and the opportunities, and giving a frank assessment of the reality. I mean, I think many investors need to come in clear-eyed, and when they have partners in government that are that direct, it really builds trust and confidence, and trust is the lifeblood of business. We want to dig deeper into the business environment reforms that are happening and efforts to strengthen governance in the DRC. We're going to hear from the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, Karina Sanders, and she's going to share a little bit of what the Bureau is working on in partnership with the DRC.
Good afternoon. First of all, I want to say welcome and thank you for the words from the Finance Minister. It is really impressive that you did not speak with notes, but I will. And I do hope and wish you a very productive time during the Bank Week here with all of these people and all these people in this room who are committed to and interested in the success of the Democratic Republic of Congo. I also want to say thank you to the Atlantic Council for inviting me to speak today, addressing vital issues that impact the DRC. It is truly an honor to be here, and I also want to give a hello to the people online as well. So me and my team, we focus on the policies that make all that you all are interested in possible, and that's why I came here to talk to you today. So peace, stability, and prosperity of both Congolese and the American people are at the cornerstone of our partnership. It's rooted in our common values and our shared interest in improving the lives of our citizens. We genuinely care about strengthening and expanding opportunities for economic growth and also for the quality of life of the Congolese people and of the American people. And stability is an essential component of a prosperous economy, but it cannot be achieved without peace. Only with peace is more possible. There is no military solution to the current crisis in Eastern Congo. There needs to be a diplomatic solution, and that is why we in the United States government support the African-led Luanda process, which is being currently led by the Angolan president, João Lourenço. The Luanda process is supporting effective progress towards a sustainable political solution for the conflict in Eastern DRC, and we urge all parties to continue on this path. A diplomatic solution for peace will pave the way for further economic and infrastructure investment that all of you have spoken of today so far. And it will also increase trade opportunities, again, for both of our countries. Since December 2022, the State Department, it's already been spoken of, PGI, the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment, has announced investments totaling over $1 billion to upgrade an existing rail line, the Libido Corridor, including a $250 million U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, DFC, financing package, and an additional $1 billion has been mobilized with the European Union and African partners to support the Greenfield Rail and complementary investments in digital access, in renewable energy, and also in agriculture-related infrastructure. We're partnering with the DRC government to increase transparency and accountability and advance policy reform efforts and improve labor conditions, including in the mining sector. The DRC is blessed and endowed with a significant share of the world's critical minerals required for clean energy and advanced technologies. This concentration of resources represents great opportunities for the DRC government, for Congolese society, and international stakeholders with the potential to greatly transform the country's economy and improve the lives of millions of Congolese. Guaranteeing social and economic benefits for the Congolese people is part of why we have a vision to support the development of a transparent, accountable, and sustainable global minerals supply chain through the establishment of a diversified and responsible investor base. We are particularly pleased that during the outskirts of the UN General Assembly in late September that the Democratic Republic of Congo recently joined the Mineral Security Partnership Forum. Congratulations. The MSP is a multilateral cooperation platform designed to use partners economic and diplomatic engagement, and other forms of support to make strategic critical minerals projects more likely to succeed. The United States and other MSP members look forward to working with the DRC to accelerate the development of diverse and sustainable critical energy mineral supply chains and to help promote the development of the DRC's critical mineral sector. We also strive to help promote the value proposition and move DRC rapidly up the critical minerals value chain. So I am pleased that so many companies and individuals are not just looking to the DRC as a mineral source, but also as a place to process and to refine and to innovate in critical minerals. The private sector and entrepreneurs will remain paramount to this effort. Government officials cannot address this alone. The private sector will also help guide the way and create new projects, new business, invitations, and all while supporting the opportunities for the next generation of Congolese innovators, business people, and entrepreneurs. But to help us achieve these goals, we all need to promote a strong and open, transparent business environment in the DRC. We hear from companies who want more transparency and accountability when conducting business in DRC, and I believe that change is possible. And in doing so, we can fully unlock the vast potential of the DRC economy. My team and I focus on peace and security every single day. So as we expand our partnership in critical minerals, we remain deeply concerned with the other challenges facing the DRC. These include some health challenges, such as the spread of Mpox in the DRC. Last year, we've been working very closely with the DRC government, with the World Health Organization, the Africa Center for Disease Control, and other international partners to help reduce transmission of the disease. Our support for the Mpox response builds on our longstanding partnerships with DRC to advance global health security and development objectives, again, impacting the lives of the Congolese people. The U.S. government has donated 50,000 doses of the DRC doses of a vaccine to the DRC Mpox response and will donate an additional 1 million doses. And cumulatively, the U.S. government has donated a total of $118 million to partners in Africa for Mpox response activities specifically. I must also be honest and say that we are also deeply concerned about the worsening humanitarian crisis resulting from continued violence in Eastern DRC. As I said before, there is no military solution to this humanitarian and security crisis in the Eastern DRC, only a diplomatic one. And like I said, my team and I focus on peace and security every single day. We support African-led solutions to the conflict, including the Luanda process, to de-escalate and address the root causes of this conflict, along with holding actors accountable for human rights abuses. So finally, I will leave you with one request, and that is to remember that with all the endowments and all the blessings comes great opportunity and great responsibility. And we must all be mindful that when we choose our actions and our policies wisely, we have to be aware of the impact that they will have on our most valuable resource, our citizens. And so the decisions that we make today will create the future, and they will provide the pathway for security, stability, and prosperity for the partnership between the Democratic Republic of Congo and the United States and further into the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Karina. And clearly, State Department deeply shares some of the concerns outlined in the earlier panels. We're going to dive into this topic of governance and improving the business investment environment a bit deeper with another conversation, and it's going to be led by one of our own senior fellows at the Africa Center, Jonathan Isolé. And we're lucky to have him because we have not only great minds on policy at the Africa Center, but we also have great minds in the sciences and math. And so Professor Isolé is a professor currently of mathematics at Northeastern University, but clearly he has deep passions in bringing together African scientists to solve problems that go beyond just solving equations. So if Jonathan will join me on stage, and I will also welcome up Peter Sullivan, the Managing Director and Head of Corporate Banking for Citi, Dave Peterson, Senior Director of Africa Program at the National Endowment for Democracy, and Aurélien Mali, who's Vice President and Senior Credit Officer at Moody's. So please welcome to the stage.
Hello, everybody. So as she mentioned, I'm surprisingly a mathematician. But in mathematics, what we do is to solve problems. So when you're a mathematician from Congo, you don't care if it's economics, politics, you have to address the problem. So I'm very happy with the panel we have here. And so we're going to discuss the business environment in the Congo. And the key point to understand is that this is not the result of one specific government or politician. It's something that is the result of 500 years of history of a country that was originally built as a place to outsource, just to take resources. And so now we want to build a better country, a country in which whatever the country produces go to the people as well. The people of the Congo, but I would say even more, the people of Africa. The Congo has a responsibility to be bigger than just the country of its citizen because of just the place it takes in Africa, in the heart of the country, of the continent. It plays a special role. So I'm going to start with Mr. Mali, who will talk about the credit rating of the Congo. And so what I'd like you to do is to explain how do we get to the credit that we have now? What does it mean for the economy of the country? And how we can make changes in the finance and the economics that basically run the country to try to improve this rating and bring opportunity to the DRC.
Good afternoon to everybody. I'm very pleased to be here because I've been the lead analyst for the sovereign rating at Moody's, covering DRC for the last 11 years. And I think an important element is the institutional framework and the governance. We rate DRC B3 with a stable outlook. And we rate also Rawbank, for example, but also other institutions that have assets in DRC. I worked with several governments, 5 to 6 ministers of finance now. And when you look at the international ranking for governance or institutional development, I don't think they reflect the effort that the government is putting in strengthening its institutional framework. The country is on a journey, so I will give a few examples so that to illustrate my point. For example, over the last, the last 3 years, they increased structurally the revenues they collect by 2% of GDP, which is significant because the average between 2015 and 2020 was 12% of GDP for revenues. So you need to do some reforms. You need to improve also your tax administration. And now they average 14.5 over the last few years. And they plan to continue to strengthen their public finance. In DRC, you used to have large shocks on macroeconomic instability driven by some external or domestic shocks or price of commodity that are fluctuating. And the government has, for the first time in a lot of long period, has managed to increase significantly its FX reserve now that are 3 months of import cover. and probably much more if you include a share of the dollars in the banking system. But it points towards probably a better resilience for the future shocks that the country will experience. You had political alternance. For people that know the region, it's a region where you have regimes of 30 to 50 or 40 years in place. So I think it's positive for the country that you had elections relatively smooth, and there is an alternance in power, which is an important element. And also I think there is a continuity and a willingness from the authorities to really partner with the institution. As the Minister, His Excellency, just said, they negotiate a new IMF program, so there will be disbursement, there will be support if there is a shock on the deficit. And this slow improvement is going to continue on the institutions. The country has been relying heavily on the mining sector. Yes, they produce almost 3 million tons. First time I visited the country, it was 600,000 tons. So you can see the ability to attract a lot of investors. But there is a big but. The country, for the moment, is not able to really harness the true share of the rand that it should have on the exploitation of its mineral. And this is a concern for us because we saw the export moving from 7-8 billion to 30 billion of minerals, and the current account is still in deficit. So it means that there are leakages. There are good reasons for that. We are given some explanation. But I think with the strengthening of the institution, fighting, increasing transparency and corruption and so on, I think there is a chance that with the transition and the solution country that the DRC is, in the future there will be a better return for the Congolese people. And as I explained, the CEO of Rawbank, the standard of living of the Congolese will improve massively with all the riches that the country has. And I will end there, but just to say that the rating is forward-looking. The country is trying to develop a domestic capital market, and we really see the potential much further than even the high growth rate that you see today. Because if you exclude the extractive sector, the growth is only 3%, and you have all this potential in agriculture, in energy, with the Inga and so on, that could really put this country on a much faster trajectory in real growth. So I will end there, and I apologize already because I'm expected somewhere, so I won't be able to stay for the rest of the conference, but I finish here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to continue with Peter Sullivan. And so we see that the DRC is getting some rating that are even better than economies that are stronger, such as Ghana and Kenya. When we see this, can we ask the following question? Is it time for the DRC to also start getting involved with more sophisticated financial tools, such as Euro bonds, or infrastructure bond or green bonds?
Yes, I think getting that rating is certainly a prerequisite to accessing market and accessing commercial funding. But I think before the country even begins to think about that, they really need to be thinking about what are the specific projects that those proceeds will be deployed in. And will those projects begin to generate kind of the commercial returns necessary to repay that debt? So they need to sort of continue on this path, about sustainability of investment and getting that financing to be done properly and deployed effectively. And a lot of that sort of gets into making sure there is the necessary institutional capacity to deploy those funds effectively, monitor those funds, and report back to investors. So investors are basically going to be gaining confidence in the government's ability to take its money, to put it to work, and to realize the true potential of the DRC. We've worked with the government on sort of the rating advisory. And from that, it has demonstrated that there is a tremendous credit narrative for the country. And we think there will be tremendous demand of investors to put money to work in the DRC. But it's to make sure that those proceeds are properly deployed, projects are monitored, and that data is then managed and disclosed. So to keep the investors as partners in really the development of the DRC.
And just following up, so DRC is trying to improve its international image when it comes to its economy, but still in the gray area for FATF. What do you think would be the best way for the country to try to clean its name and move forward?
Many countries sort of are on the gray list, and we continue to do business in those countries. And I think what happens when you get on this gray list is it does increase the cost of business, because it really demands that business people's banks need to continue to do a higher degree of due diligence of who they're partnering with, how are they operating in the country, and then monitoring that going forward. So it's not a no-go statement or status. I think it's more about saying there's weaknesses. Those weaknesses need to be addressed. The governance around that needs to be enhanced and rectified. So it should be seen, really as an opportunity, to address the DRC, put it again on a much more sustainable path. But unfortunately, it does incur sort of a business cost with those risks being highlighted.
Thank you. So, Dave, I'd like to talk about the role of democracy in improving the economy. And take the microphone. So, when we look at the description of DRC, we have all these horrible stories about its ranking in corruption, also just education and health. There are also other examples of countries that went through war and that managed to relatively quickly go up and fight these problems. So, for example, Ivory Coast and Angola, they made amazing progress within the last 10 years. How do you see DRC moving forward when it comes to the role of democracy to ensure a good business environment?
Well, clearly, democracy is critical. I think that DRC has made progress. The endowment, my organization, has been supporting civil society organizations in DRC for more than 35 years. And over that course of time, of course, there have been some very serious problems. The war, corruption, human rights abuses. It's not been easy, but our organization, along with many other international organizations, we're supporting the recent elections in DRC. And from what our partners have told us, I think we can say that there was some progress. In fact, the elections were relatively peaceful. I think the results were recognized by the Congolese people as being legitimate, by most people. I'll have to condition these things, but I think compared, quite frankly, to a lot of DRC's neighbors, there's a lot more openness, a lot more free democratic space than I won't mention the neighbors, but I think Congo does have some advantages that way. But there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And so I think in particular the judiciary. If you don't have respect for the rule of law, if you don't have independent courts, then contracts are not going to be honored, and it makes the business environment much more difficult. Corruption will only get worse. I think a number of our partners in civil society are monitoring corruption. The Congo's Not for Sale campaign, for example, is something I think that has contributed to the fight against corruption in Congo. There are many other efforts. I think it's also very important to support the independent press, the free press. I would really entreat the Congolese government and for the international community to support those journalists who maybe sometimes are criticizing what's going on, but it's very important that they be given that free space. The imprisonment of journalists or of civil society activists that are trying to make Congo a better place is only going to hurt the business environment. There are, I think, Congo is renowned for its dynamic civil society, and I think this is something that you really need to protect and support.
Thank you. So following up, so you mentioned the role of the civil society. And so in the Congo, it's a country where women play an incredible role in the economy. So I was born in Kinshasa, and like many people, you go to school in the morning, and on your way, you see a lot of mothers doing their little businesses. And often they don't get the recognition for what they're doing, that they're actually sustaining families in a situation that is specifically hard. So can you explain how recognizing the role of women and giving opportunities for their business to be recognized also play a role in just opening the economy to bring people outside of the shadow economy? Things like small loans, for example. Can you discuss how this has an effect on the business environment in the country?
Well, certainly the informal sector, which is really dominated by women, is critical to the growth of Congo. I think the business community itself, business organizations, women's business organizations in particular, need to be supported. They can play a very constructive role in creating that enabling environment that can only strengthen Congo's economy. It's not just about the mining, obviously. It's not just about the forestry. It's about that informal sector and even bringing it into the formal economy that I think ultimately is going to make prosperity and stability possible in Congo.
So finally, this question is for both of you, so maybe you will start. So the minister mentioned the role of the forests in the Congo, that this is a country that sits on the equatorial line, great river that cover all the central of Africa, and play an important role for the transition to electric cars and so on. So how does the green sector actually affect governance? Like, this is something that is just being created now, and you have countries like the Congo that can benefit from this economy that is just being born now.
So I think the potential, obviously, for the DRC, one is really the nature-based assets and wealth that the country has. And I think the world recognizes that. It's often referred to as, the lungs of Europe in the sense of the DRC, of how much emissions that it absorbs. And I think what we need to figure out, and we're certainly working with the government in this respect, is, how do we begin to mobilize financial resources to not only take advantage of that natural wealth, but to also protect and preserve that natural wealth in a sustainable manner. Obviously, many people, many communities, really rely upon the green assets of the country for survival, for livelihood. And, those need to be protected, needs to be sustained going forward. So I think, with the DRC, and I always say, I think as the DRC goes, as does Africa. So if we can't really begin to unleash the potential of the natural wealth of the DRC, we're not going to be able to do that for the rest of Africa, which will be a tremendous shame. So, we need to work with bilateral donors such as the U.S. We need to work with DFIs, to really mobilize that capital to invest into the green economy. That is the DRC, and to show ways of, I think it was previously mentioned about, demonstrating that projects work, that they deliver the impact that's intended, and that it really does generate an economic return for the people of the DRC.
Yeah, again, I think democracy plays a critical role. Obviously, many of the speakers have talked about the problem of peace in Eastern Congo, and I think that given the enormous natural wealth, much of it in Eastern Congo, that it really behooves not just the governments, not just the investors, the international community. This could be a win-win situation for Congo. If people, all the stakeholders could just apply a lot more energy, really. I don't think there has been enough effort made to bring about a peaceful solution in Congo. Despite we know that these negotiations have been going on for a long time, but I read the reports from our partners in Eastern Congo especially, and it's not a place that you want to do business. And it's, yet I think the solutions there are so clear. And again, you have to have respect for the rule of law. You have to fight the human rights abuses. You have to fight the corruption. But peace is possible. And everybody can benefit if we just put our minds to it.
Thank you so much. So to finish our panel, I'd like to send a message to everybody in the room, especially the member of the Congolese government. So when we have a beautiful country like the Congo that is rich in so many ways, we can always talk about mining, we can talk about the green economy and so on, but there is no way we can move forward if we don't also develop the tools to actually understand our own wealth and decide what we do with it. And that tool is called science. Any country that really go beyond just selling mines and so on to actually refine product, they invest in education, they invest in research and development. And for me, this is the unit of measure for the future of our country. Can we see beyond selling minerals to start thinking about building things with it to add value and to actually create new jobs for our children? And I think the panel will stop with that.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. I mean, there's a reason why you got that next Einstein Award. So we really appreciate you taking the time out. And now I'm going to be joined on stage with another one of our prominent senior fellows at the Africa Center, Jean Bellet. And following in the same suit as Jonathan, he's a professor of physics at MIT. So clearly Congo is also rich in human capital. And maybe on the peace issue, if the diplomats can't solve it anymore, we're going to have to bring in the scientists. So welcome, Jean. Come on up. Thank you. And we felt that we have to kind of wake you up this afternoon. Jean Bellet asked me if I knew any good jokes. I don't think I can come up with that, but I will ask him, what do you think is the most controversial view you hold on the DRC? That might surprise people?
Thank you very much for...
I think it's on, but just hold it closer.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for being here and for your continued presence. I'm Jean Bellet, and as Aubrey said, I'm a physicist, but I will not talk about the physics. But I will try to to balance things and to explain what many people view, outside view, is different from Congolese narrative.
Yep.
That's what I will explain today. And if we have time, I will go through everything. First of all, when we talk about Congo and about a new country, I hear people here talking about Congo is a poor country. Where this comes from? It comes from the analysis from the demographics of the Congo. When we talk about the demographics, inside, the demographic is a science. And the science goes with the population and also with the economics. You go with the plan. If you know really the demographic, you know how to make a plan for the future, for the education, for the economics, for everything. But if the theory of the demographic is not accurate, so you get everything wrong. What we'll do today, just in this instance, is not just for me to answer every question, from all of us here. And I will just define something about the phenomena of the demographic and ask you to tell me where fit the DRC.
Here's the professor. You're going to give him a question.
Just a question. When we talk about demographic, the expert from the economic development come out with some theory. The most influential theory is the DTM. DTM is the demographic transition model. DTM have 5 stages. The first stage, they decide to classify countries that have very high, that the fertility is the same as the morbidity, so the death rate.
So you're at 0 population replacement.
So 0 population replacement, the population don't grow, don't drop. That's the first category. And the second category, do you know any country in the world in this category? If you say yes, can you raise your hand? No one. The second stage, if the country will have a very high fertilities, I don't talk about the birth rate, I talk about the fertility. So you're making a lot of kids, a lot of children, and you have low morbidity, so less people die. And in the economist point of view, in this category is for the very poor country, very poor. That's why they are poor, because they have very high increase of population, and the less people die. That's the second stage. The third stage is for the country, we have moderate growth of the population and also very moderate death rate. And the fourth one is the country we have the category of the death is less, and the growth is slow. It's not very fast, but it's slow.
Yeah.
And then the fifth one is the country, I don't know if you know any country in that category. It's the category of the country. The growth of the population is very low compared to the death.
Yeah, Japan,
so
Russia, all of them.
Yes.
They're shrinking.
It's shrinking. Like you can talk about Japan also. I don't know if Japanese people are here. So
No, these are demographic realities. As many people will say, demographics
so
are destiny.
So we have very old people, and they're still there, but they are not making a lot of kids.
So which one is Congo?
Yeah. What is the category that Congolese DRC fit? That's your question I ask you. What category?
How about I'll take one? The category of high birth rate but lower death rate.
That is a category 3, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's what I was thinking also. But if you read on the literature, Congo is in a category 2. That's why people say Congolese is poor. That is the definition. So that alone scares the investor. How you can go and invest in a very poor country? How you put your money, you invest big money where people cannot buy?
Yeah, I mean, I think many people are looking for the trends, the mega trends of the future, right?
Yes.
These people will be the workers of the future.
Yes.
They'll be the consumers of the future.
Yes.
And therefore you want to come in early.
Yes.
That's the view. But then there's a risk perception versus risk reality, right? And this is something that Mustafa and others have dealt with for a long time around Africa, that maybe the perception is greater than the actual risks on the ground.
Yeah, the perception is what everybody talk about it here, is the corruption, is the weak government, all those things. But the true risk are the investor. They are the biggest risk for the Congolese investment. Why? Because they are the one bringing the corruption in the country.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a growing acceptance in the international dialogue that it takes two to tango, right?
Yes.
So therefore, corruption is not a single-sided issue, and there's been a lot more trying to be done globally to address it from both sides.
Yes, but you can address things that you are doing yourself. You need just to make sure you bring a value, you bring a principle. If you come in a country, you want to have everything easily, and you go, you start bribing the official, and then you turn around, you say, oh, there is a corruption here, and that is not fair. If the government is weak, because when you come to the money, you give the official, you have a power over them. That's why they become weak. So when you go, we have two types of investors in Congo. We have the good investors, the long-term investors. We talk about the Rawbank, they are there for a long time. And
yes, they're Congolese, yes.
Congolese and other investors. And we have the investors who came in the country not to help people, just to make money. So for them, they have to make money quickly. So they go, they bribe the official. So the official become very weak.
Yeah, I mean,
they have the problem. They are the most risk on the investment in Congo is the investor.
I started by saying, what are some controversial views that can, wake people up? And one that I hold is that often I think investors or the dialogue on the Western side is we need to wait for countries like the Congo to get their institutions right, the rule of law, governance, all the things we've been talking about, that needs to be right before investment flows. My view, and it informed by my own family history, I come from a long family line in the west of the US, so from Colorado, 3-4 generations. And when my family went to Colorado in the 1880s, there was no rule of law, zero. Americans shot each other in the streets. The mail was delivered by Western Union, and people still invested. Europeans invested, and there was corruption. Corruption built the railroads in the United States, and yet rule of law and institutions evolved with that investment, because once people are invested, they have a stake in ensuring that their assets are actually protected. And so, Rawbank obviously has a stake in Congolese rule of law because they have assets and people and working there, right? Many other investors as well. So my view is you shouldn't have to wait till there's perfect situation about corruption or about rule of law before investors invest, because it's only the interaction between investors and business people and government that makes for good policy in the end.
Yes, I will give you just one example. It's my own experience. You know, I'm from Congo, but I left my country like 37 years ago. I was first in Canada, where I met my wonderful wife, and then we moved in the US for like 30 years ago. And I decided to go. I become more American than Congolese because I live half of my life here in the US.
Sure.
So I decided to go to invest in the Congo. I hear about the corruption. But I went there with my value, my principle.
Yep.
And we create a company, the high-tech company. We design the smartphone, the laptop, computers, solar panel, battery. We bring in Congo. We say the DRC is our hub.
Yep.
Everything we built outside will come to DRC before we dispatch around the world. That's my company.
Right.
So we have been there for 4 years. Now we have stores. We create stores. Like an Apple store. We have
like in Kinshasa, people can walk into the store.
Yes. Yeah? Now we have like 36 stores around the country.
Wow.
People are working there. People didn't have a job before.
Correct.
Young people. So because we went with our value, people, you know, the official, they respect what we are doing.
Sure.
They don't come to us, oh, I will give you the money. They say, oh, this guy, you don't talk about that. That is the value the investors supposed to bring in the country.
Right.
So that was our first stage. We went to the second stage, is to build the product in Congo.
So actually adding the value, like you talked about.
Adding the value. We say, okay, we talk about the critical mineral, but in Congolese narrative, there is no critical mineral. They are natural resources.
Yeah.
Because we want the natural resources serve the people. So we say, okay, the mineral will serve you.
Yes.
And we create a job all over the country with your mineral. So what we start to do is we go with the supply chain.
Yep.
In the electronics, so we say, okay, we buy land around the country to start processing the mineral, like a coltan. And from that, we will make the electronic, we will manufacture the component, electronic component. So we just get a land in Lubumbashi that we will build a factory to process cobalt, lithium. From that, we can use it in the battery. Something the Congolese don't know, the silicon, the basic of silicon is from Congo. So silicon is come from quartz, and the quartz is come from the sand. The sand is the most mineral in the Congo. So all Congolese river, all Congolese water have a sand. Congo is the world sand factory. We don't know about it. So what silicon helps us to do is to build the solar panel. If we have a solar panel, we built in the Congo, and we start producing everything there, we can export it everywhere in Africa. And all Congolese people will benefit from that. Because right now in Congo, 99% of people don't have electricity. But if we have a solar panel, that's the easy way to extend electricity to everybody.
Yes, and this value addition is exactly what you're speaking about, transforming the resources locally, bringing in the investment that helps to anchor the change in governance and to build the human capital alongside. And that's what Jonathan was talking about. And I know we could talk for much longer, but we have a discussion coming up on adding value in critical minerals. And I'm sure we'll leave the audience wanting more of your thoughts. And Jean Ballet is writing a report for the Africa Center, and we eagerly look forward to that in the coming months. But join me in thanking Jean Ballet for sharing some of his thoughts. And now we will move into a more detailed discussion of critical minerals. It's my pleasure to welcome up to kick us off for this topic, Guy Robert Lukama. And he is the chairman of Jacquemine. And you cannot think about critical minerals in the Congo without thinking about Jacquemine's and the importance it plays in the sector, in the country. Guy Robert, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, dear honorable guests, thank you for giving me the opportunity to deliver the opening remarks of the roundtable coming shortly. Thank you for the invitation from Atlantic Council in partnership with Rawbank for such an important event. My pleasant regard to Mustafa and Ambassador Ramayad who invite me to come here. I think that the important topic captured with the question used as an entry point is key, and we have to find the tools which can unlock the potential of DRC critical minerals and diversify the offtake to design the pathway for shared value created with investors and Congolese people in terms of wealth, jobs, and sustainable future. Congolese authority, as most of them are represented here, and the partner have to collaborate to create and strengthen an attractive regulatory environment and to mitigate the risk, and also to improve the overall perception of the risk in DRC, because most of time is a perception rather than a real risk. Our key message for those seeking to invest must understand our natural resource endowment will serve as a catalyst for driving value beyond the mining sector. Wealth creation, job creation for youth, and we'll talk about demography, advancing peace, security and stability, and development are very key for us, and partly for education of our young people. These are primary interests should be drive the public and private investment policy and priority in the Congo. That's why before answering, I think it's very useful for us to question the current situation and its cause. Can we say that investment in DRC in natural resource sector needs to be unblocked? Do you really think that is still blocked? Our shared observation that we do not have necessarily today, the range of investors need to fully realize the potential to capitalize our national resource wealth. More, I'm not sure the existing portfolio of investors share the same vision we have for the long term in DRC. We must focus our effort on creating a scenario where the mining sector becomes just a profitable catalyst for other economic sector. The current paradigm is definitely unsustainable, and we need to develop some ecosystem to create opportunity and to provide benefit not only to the mining supply chain of several countries, but also and particularly for the larger Congolese population. We must recognize also the geological context and the role of our national resource endowment, which abounds in our subsoil. China, for example, continues to invest in DRC to secure access to critical minerals. But we must ourselves ask, what is preventing others to broader investment? Risk of corruption and weak governance are no longer sufficient to justify the lack of investment. We must also recognize that the world of 2024 is not the world of early 2000, and the circumstances change. When we unlock the potential of our mining endowment and we issue the new legal framework, and today the world has been changed and the DRC also has changed. It is a challenge for us to align the interests of DRC and the rest of the world in a way that is beneficial for all and in a balanced way. As we all know, the DRC position on critical minerals mapping make it unavoidable. In addition to our critical minerals, we have many related assets, such as our geographical position in the heart of Congo, equidistant from the two oceans, Indian and Atlantic one. which allow us to export our production everywhere in the world. We are more sustainable than anyone with the Congo River basin. We gave us a potential of hydroelectricity, which already allow us to produce mineral and to convert it and transform locally, and allow us to have a low carbon footprint. In line with the global regulation, as we said, green metals produced with green power. Our infrastructure network is developing from east to west, with the Lobito corridor also involved, which is a very formidable accelerator for the trade and development. We cannot forget that also we need to bolster our education system to comply with the needs and also to address the concern of employment. We are particularly open to investment that if it helps us to trigger prosperity. We are calling for more and fair competition in the exploration first and in exploitation of our asset. And more importantly, also to our diversification of our investor and off-taker of our production. For us, competition will push all the operators involved in our soil to improve the production standard and also to improve the interaction with the local communities, which benefit to everyone. It also makes it possible to propose innovative partnership model for exploitation and exploration of our resource. Previous models, as I told, showed the limit in the contribution to improve the return to the country and to improve the governance of the sector. Because currently this is not the case. I'm saddened every day more to see that the asset of my country could be emptied at low price, like it's now for the cobalt, export as raw materials with low transformation and key imbalance was inherited of the previous governance. Cobalt, for example, is no longer perceived as by many stakeholders, some of them being here, as a Congolese resource, even though we produce most of the cobalt supply to date. But the question is, what the allocation for DRC of the share value created by the cobalt? Insignificant, as you know. When we know that its decisive roles in the current market and current model of the economy. The diversification of partners and greater local processing are necessary for us for a better return of our contribution to the access to our natural resource, to the current industrial revolution underway, at a fair value and no more. I would like to share also an observation that leaves me somewhat circumspect. A large part of the end user of our resource seems to be concerned about the obvious bias brought by the preponderance of Chinese investment in the mining sector in DRC. It's a fact. And we welcome investment from other countries to come and to strengthen our mining sector. Time is ticking, and I hope that the panelists we join will help us to address collectively this status. How do we bring more investment in the country? And as I told previously, we cannot just sitting saying that the problem is the risk of corruption, demography, or weak governance. We need to address all the concerns. I would like to share, yes, the business climate has to be improved, and understand it. And efforts have been made to address it. We do not deny the challenge, but I can guarantee you that under the authority of the President Felix Tshisekedi, a lot has been done to reassure the investors. However, I share the conviction that our legislative framework today are attractive. No one has disinvested in DRC since we changed the rules in 2018. More billions of dollars came again and again in DRC. Yes, the arsons remain and are difficult to fade. JCAMIN, a private-owned company held by the government itself, is also a victim of the arson. But the return on investment remains very high. Not everything is rosy, not everything is dark. Our challenge is to sedentarize the skills, to improve our infrastructures and to get more access to energy, because today we are impacted by the drought in the south held by El Nino in Zimbabwe, Zambia, and the south of DRC. It's also an investment opportunity in itself. I've just come out for another meeting in Rawbank dedicated to the Grand Inga. In the past, it was a dream, and now it starts to become soon a reality. What is blocking investment in DRC, despite the alerting needs for critical minerals? Watching CNN and fearing about the eastern Congo, key critical minerals are not there. Few incidents have occurred in the mineral zone of Katanga that will deter investment. What else? We need to look at maybe the Section 1502 of the Dodd-Frank Act, a law in the US. We can discuss at greater length, but in short, it's quite an hindrance. This is an opportunity for me to applaud the bipartisan initiative taking place now in the US legislative branch, the Bridge Act, which will be a determined element in the new American dynamic to want to invest in DRC. Thank you for Mr. John James and Ms. Sarah Jacobs and all those who are pushing this agenda. Let's not be discouraged by the latest report issued by US Department of Labor. We talk about the forced labor. Hopefully, Cobalt Institute has the intelligence to organize very quickly and recently a symposium in DRC that brought together the stakeholders involved and to dispel the misunderstanding arising from the publication. DRC government was represented, US Department of Labor was there, the DRC Chamber of Mines was there, the representative of the European Union also, and all mining operators were able to express themselves to mitigate the effect and the real impact. It was an opportunity to tell each other everything to continue the inevitable march toward more investment in DRC and the mining sector, and even beyond. Among the avenues proposed to attract investors, we are currently thinking within JCAMIN, but it's a reflection that's being also broadly shared by the government on how to propose partnership to investors that will allow us to integrate the value chain from the mining to local processing of our mineral in DRC. We have also this discussion with Okapi. It means that people are open to discuss about it and to invest. We are convinced that the investment model must evolve. Our future partner can endorse it. We can no longer be satisfied by being just exporter of raw material or meat in metal from a low return for our country. We must do everything possible to ensure that local processing of minerals extracted DRC is there and increase local added value, job creation, and capitalize on subcontractors. This is an economic imperative for us, but also an ecological one, because transporting thousands of kilometers of raw material to be processed by employees who have often low-skilled and modestly earned constitute an historical contradiction to the current momentum. We demonstrate that we could do what we are talking about with STL, a wholly owned subsidiary of JCAMIN, financed by Rawbank and JCAMIN, to develop a unique plant for processing alloys and now producing cobalt, copper, and germanium locally. Better than exporting alloys and concentrate in China, we decided to process it locally, and it's happening now. We are obviously open to anyone who wants to replicate jointly the approach even further toward a cobalt refinery, for example. We are curious to learn from others who succeeded. We do know that the attractiveness of capital is important. Indonesian example teaches us how to manage to our strategic asset and manage value chain and export. The Atlantic Council has drawn up a very interesting report and we are using to improve our knowledge about it. It can be noted that Indonesia developed a proactive policy around two main axes. firmness on the ban of the export of raw material, and attractiveness for foreign investment with a very rapid and massive effect on creating a new local refinery project in Indonesia. The policy has resulted in a tax and industrial policy favorable for foreign investors and local investors. But nevertheless, we look at the origin of the incoming flows and the sponsor of the project. We still observe a preponderance of the China investors, which bring us back to the starting point, the voluntarism in terms of industrial policy, and also the part of our partner involvement to improve the profile of our money sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Guy Robert. Thanks for that overview and where the thinking is going on how to encourage value addition. Now it's my pleasure to bring up an old friend of mine and who has deep relationships in the region and in the sector, Tony Carroll. He is a senior advisor to Mining Indaba, and he's the person I go to talk to about what to do in the space and how to encourage more investment. So Tony, over to you to invite your panel up. I know we're adding another chair here, so.
Could I have my panelists join us here on the stage? Well, thank you, Aubrey. I appreciate the introduction, and it's great to be back in talking about the DRC. I'm not surprised to see the room filled because probably many of you have seen me in years past at the Mining Indaba. And one thing that is for certain every year at the Mining Indaba, we have a full house when we ever discuss the DRC. So it's great to see such a full room and a very busy week here. So I know a lot of you had to make some tough decisions to be here this afternoon, but I'm delighted to chair this final panel here today to sort of put some finer points on the discussions that we've heard today. This is a busy week for all of us here as we try to digest many of the thoughts and issues that have come across our radar screen this week. And I was at the World Bank earlier in this week for the release of the Global Emerging Market study, which continues to look at the high benefits and rewards of doing business in countries such as the DRC. And yet there's this risk perception that Guy Robert talked about that doesn't seem to square with reality in terms of economic growth. But I'd like to let our panelists do the speaking rather than myself. I remember first going to the DRC in 1979 and crossing into what was really a magic world for me. I have always been fascinated by the terrific and exciting opportunities, but mostly the vigor and resilience of the Congolese people, which is to me really what is the secret behind the Congo's future. It's not necessarily what's in the ground, but it's really what the people bring and their resilience and energy, which is just tremendous, and everywhere you go in Africa, you see it. So I'm convinced I'm a long-term bettor on the DRC, and I think we're starting to see some of the seeds of this growth. But I'd like to turn it over to my good friend and colleague, Gracelyn, to talk a little bit more about perhaps what's really at stake here in terms of the contribution of DRC minerals to our really energy transition. I remember this week earlier at the World Bank, we heard about this statistics really stuck in my mind. We're going to need 6 times the amount of minerals, battery minerals that we consume now in a very short period of time to really even modestly approach what is, I think, going to be the energy transition needs in the future. So Gracelyn, who has done wonderful work at CSIS and being really leading the way in Washington and elsewhere in this area of critical minerals, I'm going to let her talk a little bit more about refining what we're talking about here today about the DRC's critical role in this energy future.
Thanks, Tony. It's so good to see you, as always. Thank you for having me. I actually just got back from the DRC. I was there in August. I went down to some of the mines in the south. One of DRC's unique advantages that we don't always talk about because it becomes a cobalt narrative is it's copper. It is the second biggest copper producer in the world behind Chile. And here's why that's important. Some of you may know is Cobalt prices are actually near a 4-year low. The United States actually opened and closed its only cobalt mine last year. Started at $45 a pound at the beginning of the year, fell to $25, and then it was $15, and I can't get a pound of cobalt in the US out of the ground for $15 a pound. Now, copper prices, so what we saw was people weren't buying EVs at the same rate that they were before. So a lot of the base metals you needed for your batteries, your cobalt, your lithium, your nickel, prices actually really bottomed out. Earlier this year, we saw a 4-year low in mining activity worldwide. But copper prices kept going up. We hit a record high this year. And a lot of that is because copper is used not only for EVs, but it's also used for every form of clean tech. It's in your semiconductors. It's in national security technologies. Your fun, nerdy fact for the day is it's actually by weight the second most used commodity in national security technology. And so you have a country compared to the US's cobalt mine, which was a primary cobalt mine, of an enormous amount of copper potential. And the beautiful thing is they're joint copper cobalt mines. So when you look at the DRC, I mean, I was fascinated. I was speaking at the Financial Times Mining Summit. And beforehand, the panel that I was on had CMOC and Freeport, but it was a panel on elections in the US and China, you know, and it was still entirely about the DRC. Everywhere you go, DRC is at the center of mining. And it's really fascinating. There's this kind of perception that the DRC only wants to work with China. And that's not the case, right? A lot of you in this room know that. The Chinese economy has started to struggle, and we want diverse investment and we want diverse offtake. And I think that's the heart of why you're starting to see more, a wider need for diversification, number one. Two is, one of the questions is, it's one of the fastest growing countries in the world. So one of the questions I think about at night is, where is the potential to create jobs? Mining is not labor intensive, especially in the New World Order. It really doesn't create jobs. It's really in the processing and the manufacturing phases of that. And it's actually in American and Western interest to build processing facilities in the DRC. Last year, they exported, or the DRC exported almost $4.4 billion, which was almost all of its cobalt to China for processing. By building it domestically, you start to actually create opportunity to sell directly to the global marketplace, which benefits the whole world, right? But the two biggest challenges, I always say potential is where geology meets risk, geology meets policy climate. One is infrastructure. Mine production and processing is incredibly energy intensive. When I was down south, I saw some of the infrastructure built by Freeport back in the day, built by some of the Chinese companies that have come in since then. And only about a fifth of the DRC is electrified. Processing is incredibly energy intensive. I think about a country like South Africa. I mean, the mining sector a couple years ago accounted for almost a fifth to a third of energy consumption. So one, there's a need for infrastructure. The second thing is there's a need for mapping. Much of the DRC's potential remains unknown, because if you go outside of kind of the south and the east, it's largely unmapped. And that's where I think we have a bigger obligation. If we can't map it, it makes exploration and production very, very difficult. And the third thing is obviously policy stability and transparency. I don't have to tell you, mining is already a difficult business with this, but then when you add in things like the stability of the tax framework, right? You need a tax framework that's gonna hold. You can't change policies often. So that's really where I think we have to go, is that I'm gonna guarantee investors tax stability for the next 10 years. We've seen this work really well in other countries that have retained investment, is stability of policy. So it's really like a joint kind of, the DRC government needs to come to the table with some of these, the West needs to come to the table with some of these, and multilaterals. And I think that's the beauty of this week, is every stakeholder has a role to play, and they're all in Washington this week.
Thanks, Gracelyn. Colleagues, I'd like to turn it over to you to probably put a little finer point on this. Conundrum might be a strong word, but the puzzle of Congo's continued GDP growth over the last really decade, notwithstanding many challenges, including prices of commodities, including civil unrest, particularly in the eastern part of the country, yet it still performs. And perhaps you could give us, from your perspective as a monetary economist at the IMF, a little bit more refinement about why is that the case?
Thank you, Tony, and thank you for having me at this event today. Happy to see a lot of familiar faces. And I'm also heartened by what I'm hearing here. And it matches our perspective also on DRC, I would say, broadly. Let me start by saying that we see the country as a country of great opportunities and great challenges, right? If you just take a snapshot, well, you're gonna be maybe a little discouraged because you're gonna see governance issues, you're gonna see a lot of other challenges. But if you look at the direction of travel, I think you can be a little bit encouraged. So let me start maybe with a context and also an image. I'm borrowing from an eminent person from DRC yesterday when we were talking about progress in the country. And the person says, if you're trying to climb out of a pit, as long as people don't see your head above ground, it's hard for them to tell if you're making progress, right? So I think it's a good anecdote, a good way to describe the situation. The situation is difficult, but progress has been made. If you just wind back 5 years ago, I think the country had a difficult political transition. There was a lot of uncertainty. The country has disengaged from the international community for over a decade, and people were not sure what's going to happen. Then you have a pandemic that hit, you have a war in Ukraine and other shocks that happen, and then you have the conflict in the east of the country. So a lot of shocks happen. If you stand back in 2019 and we were told that the country was going to be hit by those shocks, I think the picture you're going to have in your mind will be different from what we have today. And we have to give credit also to the authorities here to say that over the last 5 years, they re-engaged and demonstrated a commitment to policy, making policy the right way. But there's still a long road to travel, right? So they have to recognize, I think they recognize that. If I can focus just on the IMF side and maybe other multilateral partners, you can see since 2020, the IMF has financial flows to the DRC of a little over 3.5 billion. That accounts for rapid disbursement that was done to mitigate the impact of the pandemic. The 3-year economic program that was signed in 2021 and completed this year, and of course the general ISD allocation that went to everybody. So I think that helped, and that helped also catalyze support from others. The World Bank came in also a lot with a few billion, at least 2, over the last few years, and other partners, including bilateral, brought in support, I think for the first time in 20 years, I would say this year. So, because they're seeing the direction of travel, and I think that's important to note. I can go into illustrate some policy that sustain that later, but let me say briefly on the mining sector, that it contributed a lot to the growth that we have seen. So policy helped, but also positive development in the mining sector helped. Production of cobalt and copper doubled over the last 5 years. Even though price of cobalt have gone down, it helped a lot. But we see the mining sector more as a launching pad for the country to diversify and also to reach the development goals elsewhere. Okay? And we also see that there is actually a lot of potential there. The mining sector contributed a lot, but we think that the country actually is still missing a lot of potential. If I take revenue, right now it's contributing to 1/4 to 1/3 of government revenue. And by some estimate, actually, the country is capturing less than half of its potential revenue there. So there's a lot to do there, capacity building and governance improvement. And I can name a few other things, but I'll stop here for now.
Thank you. We could have a whole separate discussion on agricultural potential in the DRC, and that's something that I think is an area that could be absolutely transformational in the DRC. But Fawzi, I'd like to bring you into this. I want to thank Mustafa and I want to thank Rawbank for sponsoring this. Banking is a challenge, I think. You've got currency issues. You've got, perhaps maybe not always the easiest contractual enforcement environment. And I remember years ago, I was working for Jacquemin Commercial, and we were the lawyers responsible for your arrangements with Credit Lyonnais and Banque Belgalaise. And we secured those loans, if you recall, by Afromed having a pile of cobalt that they could draw back and up and down from. So it was a very complicated and very legal relationship, and this goes back 25 or 30 years. But I suspect, Fawzia, what I'd be interested in learning about is that this infusion of capital and this growth of exports certainly has transformed the business climate. And are you seeing this big increase in production filter down into ordinary businesses that are necessary to support the mining business? And how are you seeing the economic landscape change at a more sort of micro level than what we're talking about here?
Yeah, thank you, Tony. One of the first things we've seen is there's an incredible expansion of production happening in the DRC. We've talked about cobalt, copper is also obviously very pronounced. How that translates into the SME market and into smaller businesses is quite interesting. I think the DRC government has put together a quite interesting plan under the ARSP program, which obliges subcontractors and suppliers in the mining chain to have majority Congolese shareholding. And that's an incredible tool to have transfer of knowledge, but not only transfer of knowledge, to allow the Congolese companies and SME companies to be able to benefit economically from what's happening around the mining industry. One of the points that I wanted to touch on, the expansion in the DRC mining area, is one of the syndicated financing structures we put together with a number of our partners. We saw AFC talk up here, where we syndicated $400 million to one of the largest mines, I would say, copper mines in the world, highest quality mines in the world. So I think as long as we keep to see this confidence from DFIs, working with commercial banks like Rawbank, who understand DRC risk very, very well, I think that will only continue to benefit DRC in general.
Thank you. And I'm going to try to put this, we talked earlier about the importance of not just having minerals in the ground, but being able to extract those minerals, process them, and transport them is really a very complicated set of infrastructure decisions and investments. The Development Bank of Southern Africa has been, I think, in the lead here in trying to put forward and support some of these infrastructure solutions that may cross borders. I mean, I think Africa is starting to emerge with the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, starting to look itself as a much more of a unitary economy than just a diverse set of 54 economies. And DBSA is one of those institutions that could be the sort of the facilitator in this process. Tell me a little bit more about what you're doing in terms of supporting infrastructure development, in part to support the mining industry, but also the betterment of people's lives.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mohan Vivekanandan from the Development Bank of Southern Africa. We're a National Development Bank of South Africa, but we have a Pan-African mandate, focused around infrastructure development. And more recently, we've started getting involved in some large infrastructure projects related to the DRC and in the region as well, and also around providing infrastructure to help unlock critical minerals projects. So it's an area and it's a country that we're very excited by, and we hope to be able to do quite a bit. Closer to home in South Africa, we've been involved in really trying to grow the energy sector to allow for mining, mineral processing, and just more generally, the economy of the country to grow. And so as an example, in the DRC, recently we were working with the AFC and the USDFC around financing the Lobito corridor, where we provided $200 million approval for the Angola portion of that railway. So, that's something where we believe will hopefully unlock mineral exports and also just improve the regional connectivity. Similarly, there was a mining project, a graphite mine in Tanzania, where we worked with the Industrial Development Corporation of South Africa in funding, in our case, the infrastructure elements to unlock that graphite mine. Our investment there is about $60 million to help unlock that mine. Similarly, we're looking at opportunities in Botswana, in South Africa, even around the disused copper mine, to bring that back to production as well. So it's one area where we're seeing significant opportunity, but it's not the only one. I mean, other projects we've been involved in the energy sector in the DRC, working with SNEL around a prepaid meters program, linked to a South African entity, and we're also involved in working with a commercial bank from South Africa in a quite a large program to help with the roads reconstruction in the DRC as well, where our exposure will be about $150 million. So we're hoping to do a lot more. We're very excited by the trends in the DRC and in the region. And for South Africa to grow and prosper, we really need to have better relationships and better connectivity with the continent. And we've got good trade flows already, and we see even more opportunities. So that's really what excites us.
We're running out of time, but I want to mention a couple things that I think are pertinent to this discussion. One of them is that I do think that American investors and American companies that operate in the mining sector bring a lot with them. I think they bring a willingness for technology transfer. I think they bring a willingness to human capacity development. I think they bring creative financing. And I think they bring a willingness to go, and try to improve the lives of the communities that are impacted by mining. Not to say that others don't do that, but I think it's a hallmark of U.S. Mining culture. I also want to talk a little bit about the area of capacity development. I think we'd be remiss here without trying to enlarge, and I think one of the things, I remember, Aubrey, I think you were there when Linda Thomas Greenfield was giving her final interview before she stepped down as Assistant Secretary of State in Africa, and I asked her the question, what were over the course of your 40-year career in diplomacy, what is the most impactful element or tool that we have in our arsenal in Africa? And she said it's education. And I think that we could do a lot more in doing and in building the capacity of African universities and national laboratories in being able to allow them to navigate their best way through this complex set of issues. My alma mater, Colorado School of Mines, has been doing a lot of work in trying to shore up many of the mining faculties, but I think we could do more. And I'm hopeful that our administration and the next administration will continue to spend money, and I think was an area that we really are competitive in, and that is in the area of technical education. I know we're running up to the end of the program, but I'd be remiss without thanking our panelists, thanking again Rawbank and Atlantic Council, and thanking all of you on a beautiful fall Friday afternoon coming out here. But I think you all will all leave with, I think, a certain bounce in our step, because I do think that the future in the DRC is bright, and I hope that we can all contribute in our various ways to make that happen. So thank you very much.
And thank you, Tony. And I'm sure that for many of us, we'll have a mini reunion at Indaba in Cape Town at the beginning of February. So really thanks to the panelists as well for sharing those broad views. One of the things we've heard today throughout the conversation is both the great potential for energy production in the DRC, but the importance of DRC to energy security in the United States. Because as we're talking about the industries of the future, they require minerals that are key for energy transition and U.S. national security. So we're pleased to be joined by Joshua Vols. He is the Deputy Assistant Secretary at the Department of Energy, and he's responsible for Africa, Middle East, Europe, and Eurasia. And when I looked at that title, I was like that's the whole world except LATAM. So quite the mandate. But please join us on stage and give some views on the energy potential and the ways we're partnering with the DRC on energy.
Good afternoon. Aubrey, thank you for having me. It's always great to be on stage with fellow Coloradans. When you're amongst Coloradans, you're amongst family. I bring greetings from Secretary Granholm and Deputy Secretary Turk, who have both, within the past 4 years under the Biden-Harris administration, really emphasized and doubled down our commitment at the Department of Energy to partnering with African partners on clean energy production on increasing the access to the value chain of the resources that exist on the continent, and doing so in service of a cleaner, more sustainable, and more enduring energy future. The United States is committed to working collaboratively with our African partners to find solutions based on mutual priorities of energy security, economic development, reliable and affordable energy access, and clean energy deployment. I know we've heard a lot from everybody today, and I am the last thing that is standing between you and a beautiful fall afternoon, so I will keep it brief. And as they say, it's all been said already, but it's not been said by everybody. So I will try to be brief in just a few summary remarks here. The Democratic Republic of Congo, as we all know, is the largest source of cobalt and many other incredibly important minerals, but as was highlighted in earlier remarks, while the GDP of the Congo is growing, the GDP per capita is dropping. And that's a trend that's problematic. That means that there are resources and opportunities that are being left on the table for that value addition that we've heard is so critical for making the investments in the DRC sustainable. Ensuring that we work closely together so that those minerals can be produced in a clean and efficient and accountable way will be key to ensuring that the Congo and the world both derive maximum benefit from these resources. And as Tony mentioned earlier, one of the comparative advantages that we have at the Department of Energy and within the United States government is our national laboratory system. And our 17 national laboratories really house the cutting edge and the world's foremost technology that is working to increase the ability to extract those resources in a more sustainable and a more in a cleaner way, and in a way that allows the impact of that extraction to be as minimal as possible, so that the communities from which those resources are extracted reap maximum benefit and minimal impact. And it really is the crown jewel of the assets and our ability to partner with our partners on the continent and in the DRC specifically to make sure that those technologies are available to everyone involved, because a rising tide lifts all ships. And that is really what we are driving towards with many of the investments that are being made using the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, and the bipartisan infrastructure law. One of the things that we are focusing on with those three incredibly important pieces of legislation is taking those critical technologies and driving down the cost of those technologies so that they are more easily deployed in these frontier markets and markets that have tremendous potential but see a real headwind in terms of the cost of technology and the cost of capital to access those resources. Or it was earlier asked, I think it might have been you, Aubrey, who said, what's your most controversial, opinion about the Democratic Republic of Congo? And Tony beat me to the punch when I was going to talk about the fact that the DRC's most valuable and renewable resource is not what's in the ground, but it's the people and the youth, and not just the energy, but the skill level. And my hot take is that we don't have a skills problem on the continent, we have an opportunity problem. Because you see a lot of the brilliant minds that are educated in African universities leave Africa because they don't have access to the opportunities to keep them on the continent. We have to change that, and that's where a value addition comes in. That's where gaining additional access to those resources and making those resources work 2- and 3-fold over as opposed to a single extraction event is really important. And that's where we're trying to focus our partnership with our partners on the continent. Accelerating the clean energy transition is going to be incredibly important. And it's something that, regardless of what happens in November here in Washington, is going to continue to be a focus for the world moving forward. And I don't think we need to stand here and talk to each other about the value proposition that the Democratic Republic of Congo presents. From Kinshasa to K Street, it's understood. What we have to do is we have to unlock the ability to, again, access those resources in a way that's sustainable, in a way that's just, in a way that creates multiple opportunities for the local population to not just see that value created and leave, but for that value to be accessible from that population. So people can increase the GDP per capita so they can spend in the local economy, so the growth and the opportunity remains sustainable. You know, the future of the world is an African future. And the Democratic Republic of Congo is the beating heart of that African future. And we at the Department of Energy are very, very excited about all of the partnerships that we have throughout the continent and the significant progress that we have made and the commitment from the Biden-Harris administration to prioritizing our partnerships on the continent. African nations have a key role to play in the global transition, and it's important that not just the top 1% benefits. There has to be value that is spread throughout the population so that investment in those opportunities, again, remain viable and remain sustainable. We've heard a lot about what's required and some of the headwinds for the private sector investing in parts of the extractive industries and the critical minerals sector specifically. And I think that if we want to really unlock that, we have to also realize that there's no free lunch. That if the commercial realities don't exist to drive that investment won't come. Those resources will stay in the ground. So getting that balance between transparency and governance and corporate social responsibility right is essential. And that kind of triad is one that cannot be prioritized one over the other. We see we've seen in the past what's happened elsewhere when corporate social responsibility and the ability for local economies to benefit from these opportunities is ignored. I won't name specific projects, but everybody in this room knows many of them on the continent that have tremendous value and tremendous potential that are locked up in domestic conflict because there are populations that feel that they are not being treated with the ability to access that value. So we can't ignore any one of those three imperatives. You know, I spend a lot of time, probably, despite my absurdly long title, I spend at least 50% of my time on the continent because that's how important it is to this administration, to my secretary, and to me and my team that we engage with our African counterparts and that we see that future be a sustainable future and a future built on partnership, persistence, and one that will lead to profitability and perspective in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joshua, for those compelling remarks and, you know, weight of my heart, ending on some 4 Ps there, you know, so partnership and perspective. And I wanted to make sure that we come away with one of the big themes that came out today, which is progress is being made. I think the minister, when he spoke, really gave us a clear-eyed view of things. And he acknowledged the challenges, but then also mentioned the progress being made. And I want to bring him back up to stage here just to give a last word on what he's heard today, some reflections on what he's heard across these various topics, and any key takeaways he wants to leave with this audience as we go in. So, Honorable Minister, if you please join me here. Minister Lukunde is the Minister of Finance, who, if any of you didn't get to hear him earlier, you're in for a treat.
This was an incredible opportunity that we got this morning. Once again, thank you so much for this platform because we want now to change the narrative. And we've heard some issues from the panelists. What we can say is that progress has been made and the country is moving forward. There is no chance, no single one, to step back. And the future is brighter than this one that we see. From 2019, as I said on the opening remarks, His Excellency President Felix Tshisekedi has committed to change, to bring policies that can change the life of the people, We've got actually what we're calling the free education policy that help us to bring at school more than 5 million of young people that were left out the system because of the poverty of the families. Now those young people are studying free. Actually, we've got another policies that is calling free healthcare for pregnant women and infant that is going underway actually in the DRC. We've been fighting against corruption and money laundering. Policies have been set up. And what we want is to change the narrative. I've heard one of the panelists said that in the DRC, 99% of the people are out of electricity. And I'm on this room, baby is already left. This is the reason why we want to have more platform like this to tell people the truth. And people have got perception of the DRC of risk. There is no such risk that people are thinking. DRC is a good place to go and to do business. We got problem that we've been achieving incredible things from 2019. And actually with our friends and partners from World Bank, from IMF, we're doing progress. And we do believe that the future is brighter than this one. Let's come and we'll be setting up a desk inquiry in the Department of Finance that we are calling Welcome Capital to DRC, that is going to work together with the National Agency that is promoting investment to make sure that people who are willing to come into our country to invest should get the right information, be guided to make sure that they come in the country and do their business freely. Actually, in strategic mineral resource, we've got opportunities everywhere. And Peter Sylvan, thank you so much, because you were saying that we need to bring project on the table before talking about Eurobond. Yes, we do have. We've got shortage of energy in the south parts of the country, and some of companies are losing benefit and income because there is no electricity. So we want people to come, we lay out the strategy and we show the people projects that have been made to make sure that we invest in energy, clean energy, because the country is the place for the clean energy. Thank you so much for this opportunity once again. Thank you, everyone. We will be very glad to host you in DRC for next time, so people can come and see on the ground that we've got resilient people, young people, we've got skilled young women, and we are fighting for better life, and we do believe that everything is gonna be okay. May God bless you, may God bless my country, and thank you so much for this opportunity once again.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency, for giving that kind of rousing end to our robust day of conversations. It's really been my pleasure to represent Ambassador Ramayad here today and the entire Africa Center and Atlantic Council. I would like to thank the Africa Center's team for putting this on. It's no easy feat. So please join me in a round of applause for Ben, Alex, Masiri, Sibi, and the team that's put this together today. And you can look forward to more programming from the Africa Center, both on critical minerals, we have a task force running, and on the DRC, and reframing risk and understanding risk for investment. So we look forward to seeing you at future events. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon and the weekend. Thank you very much.
DRC, a nation of continental proportions. The DRC's central location in Africa positions it as a strategic trade hub, supported by its membership in ECCAS, EAC, and COMESA, fostering regional economic cooperation. Booming economy and strong human capital. Booming economy in 2023 saw real GDP growth of 8.4%, driven by key critical minerals such as cobalt, lithium, and germanium, the future of which is further further supported by strong human capital, of which 45% is under the age of 18. A growing market and rich in mineral resources. With over 80 million people and a growing market in its main economic and population hubs, the DRC is one of the world's richest countries in resources, home to major deposits of copper, cobalt, diamonds, gold, and other strategic minerals that are globally renowned. Congo Basin, 1.5 million square kilometers tropical forest. The Congo Basin is one of the largest carbon sinks, harboring the world's second largest tropical forest, spanning 1.5 million square kilometers. Estimated to absorb 1.2 billion tons of carbon dioxide annually, protecting the Congo Basin from deforestation is vital for helping regulate the Earth's climate and combating global warming. Agriculture. The DRC is the world's third largest cassava producer and the largest plantain producer. Environmental initiatives aim to conserve 30% of territory by 2030, addressing ecological challenges. The Democratic Republic of Congo is on the path to renewal. Recent reforms to improve governance and the business climate are boosting investor confidence for a prosperous future. A resource-rich mining sector. The DRC has between 60% and 80% of the world's coltan reserves, 70% of the world's cobalt reserves, large reserves of copper, third larger producer in the world, diamonds, gold, and other precious minerals. Germanium, the STL plant, owned by DRC's Gécamines and partly financed by the largest commercial bank in the DRC, produces 30 tons of germanium per year. The USA needs 30 tons annually, but only produces 2.5. Lithium, home to one of the world's largest hard rock lithium deposits. Agricultural potential still largely untapped. The country has 80 million hectares of arable land, of which only 10% is currently cultivated. This offers enormous opportunities for the development of agribusiness. Infrastructure as a key strategic investment, particularly in energy and roads. The Inga dams, located around 220 kilometers from Kinshasa, have the potential capacity to generate approximately 45 gigawatts of power, enough to eventually supply a third of Africa. Additionally, developing road infrastructure to link economic hubs and export gateways is vital for current mining exports and future agricultural exports. Financing tomorrow's DRC with today's resources. Revised agreements between private companies and public institutions will finance future projects through increased royalties. Financing tomorrow's Democratic Republic of Congo for the Congolese people. DRC, time for choice.